members do you typically bring to a C.A.R. meeting, and how are those people chosen? And let's start with Crystal.
Hey, so currently we have 2 C.A.R. we have 3 total and 2 that we actually take to business meetings with us. Those are, I mean, they're decided by our bylaws policy. If there's anybody who wants to attend outside of that, it just has to be approved by the board of directors. And again, that's all policy.
Great, thank you. Dean.
So I believe we have around 15 that were allocated. We're currently sending about 12. The process for selecting who represents us as C.A.R. directors is that our board of directors votes on that every year. I will say that for the most part, nobody gets onto that list until they've at least served at the board of directors level for the local association. And likely they won't get on the list unless they've actually served at the executive committee level. And we kind of start there. So our executive committee is made up of our secretary treasurer, president-elect, president, and past president. And that's a expected climb, right? So you come in as secretary treasurer, you get added as a C.A.R. director. And then after your past president year, occasionally we'll have a past president that no longer wishes to serve as a C.A.R. director, but usually they do. And so somewhere along the way, we have to have somebody drop off. So it becomes a budgeting item for us. How many people can we afford to send and how many people want to go? And those two things usually line up.
Great, thanks, Dean. Paul?
We usually travel with about 22 directors, and then when you add in, staff, about 25, and our directors are chosen in different ways. All the officers are automatically directors, and we also have districts. We have 5 districts that are regional, and each district has a chair for a set year. And each of those chairs is also a C.A.R. director. So we invariably will have 5 new directors for C.A.R. a year. Then we have directors for life, the honorary directors for life. And so when all the statutorily established positions in our bylaws are filled, we usually have about 10 to 12 at-large spots. And people are invited to apply. They're selected by our regional nominating committee. I think we're somewhat unique in that we're our own region. So we, my staff and myself are always dealing with a regional chair and meetings and everything else. It's not something where we're part of a region where we're taking turns. And I know that there's several of us, I think Elaine and Santa Clara, Neil, but I think we're still the exception and not the rule.
Great, thanks, Paul. Wendy.
Pretty similar to the others. We have our current allocation, at least since I've been here for 6 years now, is 7. So the first 5 spots per our policy immediately go to the officers. And then the incoming president will usually make a recommendation or select the remaining 2. And, typically they're sitting on the board or they've been active at C.A.R., serving on committees, identified as someone who, obviously will participate and bring value to participating in the state meetings. And then again, I said it was ratified by the board. So we have the 7, but we also have a pretty active membership in terms of serving for several years in a variety of committees. So we end up bringing about 18 to 20. And then for typically the Sacramento meetings, we have a leadership academy, which is 8 people. So in every other year or almost every year scenario, we'll have an additional 8 leadership academies that are participants that come for the legislative day. So it's following policy and then just making sure the board ratifies who travels. So.
Great, thanks, Wendy. Let's talk about how they get to and from the meetings. If they need to fly, do you book their flights? And if they're driving, do you make them carpool? Let's start with Dean on this one.
Yes, we book everyone's flights, and no, we do not make them carpool. But I think the furthest thing we drive to is Monterey. And usually people just do carpool because they don't necessarily want to drive by themselves unless they're me. But yeah, we do book all their flights, and we do that because we're just trying to keep everybody together and keep it easy. We're trying to herd the cats, as you were. So it makes it a lot simpler when we do it like that. Sometimes, well, I won't jump ahead to any other topics that may come up, but yes, book flights, and we don't make them carpool.
Okay, thanks, Dean. Wendy?
So I do not book flights, but I do remind them to send me their receipts ahead of time, and we issue what we call travel checks at least a week or so in advance, which covers the nightly cost of their hotel. It doesn't include any like resort fees or taxes or anything. They can submit an expense report and turn that in later. So they do book on their own airline flights. And then for traveling, we typically do, we encourage it. Some do, some don't. So it's just hit or miss. It depends on how, like Dean, how far they're traveling, if they want to carpool. I usually check flights about, 30 days out or so, and kind of give them a range of, what will reimburse up to this amount, because we do have a few travelers who just have decided in life that they're going to treat themselves and they will only fly first class, but that obviously is on them. So we give them kind of that range.
Perfect. Paul?
We do not book flights like Wendy. We tell them, a month or so or earlier in advance that this is what the going rate on Southwest is, and that's the average that we'll be reimbursing, because we have some of our directors who want to fly out of San Francisco, some who want to fly out of San Jose, and maybe the occasional one who wants to fly out of Oakland. So, we're not running a travel agency down to those details. We don't necessarily encourage folks to carpool when they're going to Sacramento, but on occasion, we will facilitate ride coordination for folks who ask.
Great, thanks. Crystal?
After listening to the amount of members who are traveling with the other panelists, it almost made my head explode thinking about that. That's amazing. I'm sure you have a lot more staff too. So the ones who are traveling with me are my president and president-elect, and I've developed a relationship with them. I know what their comfort levels are in travel, if they're experienced with booking travel or if they need some help. And so I just make it really clear to them that I'm here if they need me, or if they want to book their own travel, I'm fine with that too. They just have to make sure that they get me that receipt. And I've never had it where someone has, given me a receipt and it's been for first class, although that there is that potential that it could happen. So I try to make it really clear, like, do not get first class. Business class is okay if you're if it's within affordable range. I can understand needing a little more leg room in there, but it's really, with me, it's a case-by-case basis. Every incoming president is different, and they all have different travel needs. Sometimes the president and president-elect get along really well and they like to travel together, and so they will carpool, and that's great. But I don't force that or really force anything upon them without talking to them first in advance. And we all have already made our relationships with our president-elects probably pre them even being president-elect. So we all know what their comfort levels are when it comes to travel.
Thank you. Now, here's how we find out how much you guys babysit. Do you print out their meeting materials for them ahead of time or guide them in getting their materials printed out? Let's start with Paul.
We don't print out materials anymore. What we will do is invariably, when Rick sends out an email, I will send a follow-up email reminding them to look for Rick's email, and also highlight what I think is most useful for them in Rick's email in a shorter version. We also put together a roster with all the directors' cell phone numbers so that they can communicate with each other and text with each other at the meetings. And for caucus, we have caucus note sheets, and that's the meetings as they've been conducted or they're being conducted on the schedule. And by each meeting, we will put who's the regional rep and who are the members of that committee, and a couple lines so that they can take notes. And now we used to print those and distribute them, and we still take some printed copies, but we electronically send them to everyone. In fact, we sent it out yesterday because we think that the C.A.R. schedule won't change anymore, hopefully. And so they can actually pull that up on their iPad or any other tablet and sort of fill along in caucus and know who's supposed to be where and who's doing what for the whole week.
That's a really great tool, Paul. Thank you. Dean, how about you?
So up until last week, we have always put together a full binder for all of our traveling C.A.R. directors. When I say a full binder, I mean a 1-inch binder, but we actually schedule a C.A.R. directors meeting a week ahead of time. And that's a requirement for all of our traveling C.A.R. directors. We go over everything in the binder, which includes a roster with cell phone numbers and email addresses. It includes any events that were pre-registered for, which could be an installation. It could be a regional dinner, and anything else that may be a part of the trip. And then we would include the entire meeting schedule. During that meeting, we would go over any legislative hot topics, any particular other hot topics that we feel like we need to be present and speak to. And then we would go over we would go through the whole entire meeting schedule and who's attending what meetings, and we'd write everything down, and then we would compile all that and send it all back out. As of this last meeting, we had our C.A.R. directors meeting last week, and we said, look, you're all grown-ups. So you got the app. It's really easy to click the button and say, these are the meetings I'm going to. We still went through all the meetings to make sure that, we're hearing somebody saying, yep, I'm going to that one or whatever, so that we make sure everything's covered. And all the rest of the materials that I mentioned that we would put in a binder, we just sent as a PDF.
Great. Crystal.
I'm, like I said before, it's kind of a case-by-case basis. I tend to not babysit very much. I try to do a lot of the work beforehand, which is kind of what it sounds like Paul and you do as well. The more work you put in beforehand, the easier it will be at the actual meetings. I do schedule a meeting and sit down and go over the schedule with them and the importance of going to those committee meetings, how the whole process works, going to committee meetings, how caucus works, how the board of directors meeting works, and why it's important to go to that is kind of a final step in the whole process. And I try to get them, I utilize that time to try to get them really excited to be there. And I found that the times that I don't do that, they tend to want to venture away and they want to go explore other things while there's committee meetings happening. So I definitely recommend that meeting. It's very helpful. Also, I do not print out anything. Everything is sent out electronically. I've done that for quite some time. And I do highlight everything. I usually have like mandatory things highlighted red, what I recommend going to highlighted yellow. And then I also tell them where I will be, because I go to everything. I go to not literally everything, but my day is full. And I think it's good to lead by example. And if they see you at all the things, then they'll feel like, oh, I need to be at this as well. So I tell them where I'll be. So if they are like, oh, why isn't Crystal here? It's like, oh, she's over there. I don't know if they actually ever really look at where I am or not, but I think that they feel comfortable that they have that information.
Great. Thanks, Crystal. Wendy.
So I feel like for those of us that are old enough, I feel like I'm Julie from the Love Boat and Dean is Isaac. making drinks. So we do things that sounds very similar. I don't print anything. We have a meeting before everyone leaves, where we go through the schedule. I actually made a huge mistake. I guess it turned out good, but now I have to do it every year. I made a mistake in taking the tentative schedule from C.A.R. and I transferred that to my own Word document, and it's all on a chart and graph. And then when we have our meeting, that's where we make those assignments on the side. So what turned out is that they like the view, the look of my schedule better than C.A.R.'s. No offense to C.A.R. who does it. So now I have to do that every year, and I'm constantly updating it, which is, it's fine. They like it. So nothing too different than what everyone else has already talked about. Don't print materials. They get everything electronic. The only thing I will add is that probably this is where the Julie thing comes in from the Love Boat, and that is I create a group text from my phone, and everyone is on there, and then I send reminders when it's you know, a forum that we've decided that all of us need to be at, or it's the board meeting, or it's whatever, and then I will just remind them. I'll send a quick text and say, hey, everyone should be here. If whoever gets there first, save seats for X amount of number of people. So that's kind of how we do it.
Terrific. So we kind of went over the next question already, and that was, do you tell your people where to be and when? And if so, what is your system for directing them? It sounds like most of you have meetings and you give them suggestions. Wendy's got a great thing going with the chart. Anybody else have anything to add on that one? Okay, good, good. Do you typically go to meetings with your directors, or does everyone do their own thing? Let's start with Crystal.
I think I kind of already went over this, but yes, I do. I try to go to everything that I can. If I'm not going to it for the full amount of time, I try to at least stop by. Like I said, I think it's good to lead by example. I know that there are some AEs, I'm not sure about here, but when I was like in Washington, there were some AEs who wouldn't go to like the board meeting at the end. And I never really fully understood that. I didn't judge it necessarily. I just didn't understand, like, if you're expecting the, you know, your volunteer members to go to that, I think it's good as an association executive to go to that as well and be able to explain things that maybe they don't understand, or just be there, just be present. But yeah, I think that pretty much covers it. Yeah, I think it's important to go.
Great, thank you. Dean, anything to add for that?
I do not go to every meeting. I go to the meetings that I believe are pertinent to me. You know, I'll make sure I'm attending certainly the member director forum and stuff like that. Occasionally I'll go to a DRE forum or a legal update, but otherwise I'm trying to make sure I'm hitting the stuff that's important to what I do, like pro standards and even ledge, and of course our AE committee meeting. I do not go to the NAR board of director meetings because there's no point, and half the time there's no room. We have one NAR director. We may have a second one coming up this year, but for those, I actually leave the night before, as well as the rest of our travelers do, because they don't have any input at the board meeting. They can't make any decisions. So.
Perfect. Thanks, Dean. Paul, do you go to meetings with your people, or does everybody do their own thing?
They primarily know what they need to do, but I mean, like Dean, I go to member director, I go to the board of directors meetings. Maybe we'll stop by, besides the AE and pro standards meeting, other major meetings. And the other thing is, at the breaks, I try to be visible or accessible in case any of my folks are wandering aimlessly. I can point them in the right direction, or if they need a suggestion about something outside of their assignments that they may want to go check out a committee meeting. So I don't spend, outside of the the board meetings, member director and the AE meetings, I don't spend the whole allocated amount of time in any really other given meeting.
Thanks, Paul. And Wendy, can you send me your template for that chart? Everybody wants it. The chat's blowing up. Everyone's a glutton for punishment. You're muted.
Yes, I'll send it. No worries.
Thank you. And how about you, Wendy? Do you do meetings with your members, or do they pretty much go on their own?
I think I lean a little more towards Crystal on this one. I came into, I say 6 years and I still feel new because everyone is just so amazing, this group of people. So I do go to every meeting that I possibly can. Because here's the thing, someone's going to ask me something and I hate not knowing at least a little bit about something or know where to go to find something else. So yes, I do. Everything is really dictated by the schedule that we laid out prior to even arriving. So like Crystal, they know where I'm going to be and why I won't be at a certain something. So I do try to attend, most everything.
Great, thank you. And Donna Hawker wants to know how many, no, not Donna, sorry. Somebody else. Kim Foreman wants to know how many of you attend the President's Forum with your president? For me, it always depended on who the president was at the time, because some of them were much more interesting than others. So let's move on to food. How many of you regularly dine with your directors? And let's start with Wendy here. Do you typically have meals with them?
It's hit or miss. Sometimes people will reach out to me. Some of our travelers, our directors will reach out to me in advance and say they need to talk to me about a couple things or this or that. And then we do kind of break bread together once in a while. But we typically, so the fall C.A.R. meeting, we will host a big dinner for all of us to attend. So it really is, it's not super formal outside of that. It's just someone will grab me and say, hey, do you have plans tonight? Or are you doing something or whatever? And sometimes I'm exhausted. Sometimes I say, no, I'm going to pass this time, or yes, let's go. And then a couple other people tag along. So.
Great, thank you. Dean.
Yes, we dine frequently together. I actually enjoy all of my C.A.R. directors. We actually have a lot of fun going to a different restaurant, sometimes lunch. It just kind of depends. A lot of times for lunches, we'll get like about half the group. I am kind of viewed as like Daddy Warbucks. So because we do pay for everything. And so we have a corporate card that we use that on. I don't know if we're going to get to this question or not, but I literally put everybody's rooms on the corporate card. We pay for every single thing we can, and we reimburse for very little. We just don't get a lot that comes back as reimbursements because we pay for so much. But because of that, yeah, they have a tendency to want to, where's Dean? Where are we going for dinner? What's going on? And of course, I'm not a foodie, so I'll eat just about anything as long as it's not a mud pie. And so I have a couple directors that I point everybody to. Go talk to Jeffrey about where we're going for dinner, because Jeffrey's the foodie and he'll find us a good place. But other than that, yeah, we do eat together a lot.
Thanks, Dean. Crystal, how about you? Do you typically dine with your directors?
Absolutely. I love to eat. So it's kind of the highlight. And it's really nice. I schedule it ahead of time, maybe not necessarily where we're gonna go, but just like this is the time that we'll go out to dinner together. And it's a really nice environment. Like, it's less formal. And it's a really good time if you just, want to get to know the people you're traveling with. That's a perfect opportunity to do it because it's just you and them. And a lot of really great relationships with my directors have been established because of that dinner. So outside of just the love of food, I think it's just a really great idea if you're not already doing that.
Thanks, Crystal. And Paul, how about you? Do you typically dine with your directors?
We have a regional dinner one night when we're together. The other nights, people are pretty much on their own. Occasionally, I'll make some open table reservations and turn it over to groups. I guess, we're not going to show up with a flying wedge of 22 people all the time. And they will either make dinner reservations for a group, anywhere from 6 to 8 of them. Or one of the things that we also encourage, this is a great opportunity for them to network with people outside of our association and perhaps have dinner or drinks with someone from, say, Southern California or someone else, get other experiences, other standards of practice, other issues of concern. So one night a week, in the week, definitely. The others, they're pretty much independent and on their own, and they may travel in smaller packs.
Great, thanks, Paul. Another question, are your members required to do anything specific when they travel? So do they have a specific number of meetings they need to go to, or they're reporting on them, or even reporting back to membership? Are there any stipulations that you put on your traveling people? And let's start with Wendy.
No, we kind of know just from the pre-meeting what the expectation is, and that's a perfect opportunity for us, reviewing caucus expectations, which is, which members are reporting members, who's going to give the report, what that expectation is. Other than that, we don't.
Paul?
We used to require directors do a written report of the meetings they attended, and that was sort of fraught with so many issues and so many problems, and C.A.R. does a nicer summary. But we do have a reimbursement sheet where they need to verify that they went to member director forum, what meetings that they were assigned to, did they attend, were they excused, and they usually have to verify that all the information is accurate. And when they submit that with their folio and their travel information, they get reimbursed.
Great, thank you. How about Dean? Any requirements of your travelers?
We don't have any requirements. Our group is small enough at 12 that everybody pretty much knows where everybody is or what's going on. If we haven't seen somebody in a minute, that becomes very evident. And they all do get along really well and care about each other. So they are looking out that way. One thing we do is after every C.A.R. meeting and after every N.A.R. meeting, we still have weekly marketing meetings, and we have speakers at those meetings every week. Could be somebody from the county or the city or whatever. But for the week after the C.A.R. meetings, we do a C.A.R. panel. The week after an N.A.R. meeting, we do an N.A.R. panel, and those folks that attended, maybe not all of them, but whoever has input on a particular topic will give an oral report to the group in attendance as to what's going on with the items that they were responsible to track.
Great idea. Crystal?
Currently, we don't have any requirements like in our policy, but I think I'm going to take what Dean just said, and now I'm going to have a panel at our marketing meeting afterwards. I think it's a fantastic idea. Usually at the following board meeting, I put that on the agenda so that whomever went to it can discuss what was brought up. And mainly that's just because I don't want to be the one to discuss it. I want, they're the ones who should be speaking about it. So I do tell them like that's the expectation for me. But there's nothing actually like policies or anything like that regarding it.
Good, thank you. All right, let's talk about the reimbursements. So Dean, you already mentioned that you put the hotel rooms on the company credit card. How do the rest of you handle hotel accommodations and reimbursement? Let's go with Paul.
We reimburse for the hotel, and invariably members will put the directors will put it on their own card for either the points or the Hyatt or Marriott points as well. So they will submit a folio, and we will reimburse for all the customary charges. If there's a resort fee, the nightly fee. We also provide a per diem, which I believe is fairly generous. So hopefully no one from the IRS is here, because our accountant told us it was generous. And we reimburse either mileage, state of Monterey or Sacramento, or airfare, which is, the customary, 21 days or 14 days in advance. And if, say, someone wants to drive to an area where we're all flying, they don't get mileage, but they will get the average airfare that everyone else is getting.
Perfect.
So we cover all their expenses. In addition to, we pay for the installation tickets, we'll pay for the regional dinners. So try to keep them to no out-of-pocket expenses unless it's their prerogative and their choice.
Great, thank you. Wendy, how about you?
We cover the cost of the hotel per night. I mentioned earlier, we don't cover the tax or any resort fee, any parking. They can submit a reimbursement for that later. So we cover flights, mileage if they decide to drive, and then the hotel. And then we have a per diem as well. So they get what we call a travel check in advance, which is the hotel night, the per diem for meals, and then so hotel per diem, and then if they have mileage and if they submitted their airline ticket in advance, it's on that check as well. Otherwise, they will just get reimbursed after the fact and submit invoices for the remaining expenses.
And you require receipts for all of those?
Anything that's remaining that they're asking for reimbursement for, like parking at the airport or mileage or whatever, if it's something that you would have a receipt for, yes, we do require a receipt for that.
Great. And Crystal?
So like Wendy, we do a travel check as well that goes out previous. It's just kind of funny because right when we were talking about that, I was like, oh, I need to do that. It's about that time. So it covers mileage, the daily per diem, hotel parking, and if there's a flight, then it'll be reimbursed on that. We need to get the receipt beforehand. I think I'm probably missing something, but we cover the full cost of the hotel. Everything goes on the company card. And then the dinner that we were talking about before, I'll usually cover that as well, even though they're getting per diem on top of that. It just really doesn't matter. And I have seen in the past where, or actually it was one of my past associations, we started to do receipts, and there's issues with alcohol purchase and getting reimbursed for alcohol when they weren't supposed to, those type of things. It seemed like that was a real issue. And so to make it so it didn't happen, that's kind of where that stipend came in, because if they get a stipend, then they can, if they want to spend the entire, $100 on alcohol, then they can. If they don't want to eat and just drink, it's up to them. So the stipend really helps to just stifle any question or any judgment on booze at these things.
Good, thank you. Dean, do you have anything you want to add?
I do. We used to do checks up front, right? So we'd figure out the cost of the airline, figure out the cost of the hotel. We'd issue a check. And I've been here for 32 years. And so that was under one of my predecessors. But then we had to turn around and issue a 1099 at the end of the year for all of the directors that received a check from the association. And then they had to report on it. So we just stopped doing that probably in the mid 2000s. And we, like I said, we literally pay for everything. But I'll tell you something that's very interesting. We do cover drinks. Everybody kind of knows, hey, look, it's a 2-drink max. Like if we're going to dinner, or we're doing whatever, you can't just sit there and load up on alcohol. You can do whatever you want after the dinner's over, but we're going to cover something reasonable. Our stipend, let's say it's, in the past, it's, I don't know, Monterey was maybe $69. It seems like that was the per diem rate according to the IRS or whoever it is that creates that thing. That's for food, right? So we budget for the per diem rate for each person. We never spend anywhere near it. And that's why we're more liberal when it comes to, hey, you know what, we're going to go ahead and pay for drinks at dinner tonight, things like that, because we've never gotten, we save a ton of money because they're, whatever food they're getting that I'm paying for costs less than what they would be doing if they were just getting a direct reimbursement. And so it's worked out pretty well to do it that way for us.
So Dean, how do you come up with that stipend amount without saying what the stipend amount is? How do you determine that?
We go online and look at there's a website somewhere that has the per diem meal rates. I'm not sure if it's the IRS or if it's by state, but there's a website that has the per diem meal rates for every major city in the country.
How about the rest of you, Wendy?
I apologize. I had to step out because there's a possum in my yard and my dog is terrorizing it today. It was a little chaotic. So what's the question really quick? I apologize.
How do you come up with the per diem rate without divulging what that is?
Same as Dean, we just look at requirement from IRS and take, any advice from our CPA. And we review that every year, take a look at it.
Paul, I know yours is different. How do you do since it's so generous?
We look at what the IRS says, we listen to our accountant, and then we sort of do what we want to do, or what our budget and finance committee determines. Once again, like Dean, we do what we do to avoid sending everyone a 1099. I mean, that's the one thing. I know that it's a lot easier with C.A.R. and NAR, and several of my colleagues will, say, here's a set amount. We've done all the meticulous calculations as to what this trip is going to cost you, and here's the check. And normally, I guess you would get the check after you complete the travel, but we just want to not burden our folks with a 1099, so we do the actual expenses. And and it's easy because for the hotel you get one folio, and regardless of how many meals or drinks or anything else, and you just take out, you take out the parking, you take out everything else, and you total that, and that's pretty much what you give everyone. Some people may not have parking and others may, but you take the tax, the room fee, all the taxes. There's usually 3 or 4 taxes, and you add that up, and so how much they're going to get. People, we usually reimburse for, what is it? I think it's 3 nights if people need an extra night, and there's a reason for that that fits within our policy. We'll reimburse for that. But there's also people who may want to add a day or 2 before or a day or 2 after, and that's on them.
Got it. So Crystal and Wendy, do you 1099 your travelers? Crystal, let's start with you.
No, I do not, but I'm wondering if I should. I don't think so. I think we keep it at a low enough amount that we don't need to, because we take care of pretty much everything except for that per diem and mileage. And I could be wrong about that, but I suppose it's been working, so we'll just keep going with it.
And Wendy, how about you?
No, we don't 1099 them because we had a long discussion a couple of years ago about this. They were feeling like, it wasn't enough. And so we actually, our policy states we give them the choice, and almost all of them don't want, because if you 1099 them, then I have to have receipts for absolutely everything to reimburse them. So we just follow, like I said, we review with our CPA every year, make sure that we're doing it, according to law. And right now we haven't had to. So, but now with everything rising, that could change, right?
Wendy, tell me about your travel policy. Is it pretty extensive?
It's not. It's been a while since I looked at it, to be honest with you, but I would say, on a page, it probably takes up 3/4 of a page. Maybe it's a page or so. So no, I don't think it's super extensive. No, and I can share it with everybody if they want.
Would you mind?
Yeah, I'll drop the link in there and you can just search the PDF for travel.
Thank you. And Paul, you had mentioned a travel policy also. Is it pretty in depth?
It is. It's pretty detailed. I think it's like 6 or 7 pages because it covers different scenarios and reimbursements. And every director is given that policy at the start of the year so that they are familiar with what the policy is. And, it sets the time frame for submitting receipts, and that if they usually have 30 days to submit everything in order to get reimbursed and keep keep the checks flowing. So yeah, it's a pretty detailed document.
Dean, how about you?
Ours is a one pager. It's pretty simplistic. It does cover the basics with regards to flights, hotels, meals. The most important thing we have on there, and from my perspective, is nobody gets reimbursed anything at all if you haven't been previously authorized by the association to travel on our behalf. We had a member somewhere along the way that was one of our traveling directors, and then they decided that they were going to get added to some NAR committees, but yet they were not an NAR director. And after they got added to the NAR committees, they wanted to get reimbursed for their travel costs. And it was like, nobody authorized you to sign up for that, which of course, anybody can. And so anyway, that was the main reason that our travel policy was created. But then we threw some of the other stuff in there with it. But it's literally one page. I just looked at it.
Excellent. And Crystal, do you guys have a travel policy as well?
We do, yeah, and it's pretty simple. I think it's like 1 to 2 paragraphs. If you take all of the extra wording out of it, it's probably only 1 paragraph. Real.
If any of you are willing to share those travel policies, if you could just email them to me, I'm sure that would be helpful to some of the associations that haven't developed one yet. And Wendy, I pulled yours out of the chat. So that's all I have as far as questions go. Does anyone have anything else they want to add, or even from the people who are not on the panel, is there anything that you're doing that you think would be helpful for the others to know? You can raise your hand, unmute yourself. Elizabeth.
So I put a note in the chat that we went ahead and did a one-time stipend for mileage reimbursement for the upcoming trip because the IRS rate was set in December of 2021, and gas is up about $2 a gallon since that rate was set. So, I mean, just something to think about as you talk with your people, and you don't want them to be out of pocket. Not all of my people have a Tesla or electric car. And we drive to Sacramento, and it's quite a lot of miles. So we're going to do a little stipend, and it will be after the fact, the mileage stipend, because it's based in part, the formula had to do with how many miles it was round trip, et cetera, et cetera.
Great. Thank you. Anybody else? Crystal, up front.
I was responding to that question. If we the upfront, no, if we give the stipend before or after, and I said upfront.
So you and Crystal, you and Wendy do them up front, and then Paul and Dean do them after, correct?
Correct. We do it after the board of directors meeting. And I wanted, if I could, Peggy, mention something with respect to what Dean was saying. In addition to our travel policy, we also have a non-director unreimbursed travel policy. So if someone has a C.A.R. committee meeting or an NAR committee meeting, they can apply for partial funding, but they need to do it so many days before or so many days after the meeting, and it's reviewed by our budget committee, and they may be given a stipend. And there's certain criteria that they need to meet, including being a Realtor Action Fund supporter and other recommendations.
Great, perfect. Anybody else have anything for the greater good? Seeing no one, I think we're ready to end the meeting. I would love to thank all the panelists for being so willing to share all of your secrets. I learned some new stuff too, and I know that you guys learned some stuff from each other as well. So yay for being such a great resource to one another. I appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing all of you in Sacramento. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Peggy.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Bye.
Hey, Peggy, quick question.
Yes.
Are we using the YAP app for C.A.R. meetings? I can't, what's the ID or whatever?
Dean's nodding. I don't know.
Yeah, we are using the app, and I believe it's C.A.R. Spring 22.
C.A.R. Spring 22. Okay. If that's
Yeah,
not
I'll
it,
tell you,
will
I
do-
didn't have to load it. So when
Oh,
I
okay.
my Yap app, it had already updated itself since I had the last C.A.R. one in there. So
Oh, good to know. Okay. Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
I'll
Yep.
include that in the follow-up as well.
That'd be great. Thank you, Peggy. Thanks.
Okay, thanks again, everybody.
Bye,
Thanks.
Peggy. You're amazing.
See you next week. You too. Mwah.